Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to be going over the history and geography of Paraguay, or as pretty much everyone else in the world calls it, it's Paraguay. The American pronunciation is Paraguay, but like literally nobody else calls it that, so during my research I've been kind of flip-flopping, so you'll probably hear that tonight. I've been saying Paraguay my whole life, so it's hard to get used to the change. But anyway, let me go over its geography, its history, and then we'll flip through this book, and I'll show you lots of cool pictures of Paraguay. But first, personal notes. Don't forget that I have an Instagram for this account. It's a behind-the-scenes account, so you can get little hints about what countries are coming up next, or see some of how this whole process works. And also don't forget to subscribe, because I do have a few more Paraguay videos coming up, and I have a lot of cool things planned for this month. I'm gonna actually try out a role play this month, so fingers crossed that works out. On a more personal note, ignore this boo-boo. If you haven't noticed all the little sores on my hands lately, I have a very particular form of eczema that only affects my hands and fingers and gets worse the more often you wash your hands. So you can imagine how bad it's been this past year or so. I've got a really bad flare-up on this finger, and when I was writing and taking notes, I put that finger on the paper, so it's really sensitive right now. So excuse the band-aid for this video and the next couple of videos. It just needs some time to heal a little bit. But anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about Paraguay. Let me get my pencil. Paraguay is in South America, and yes, in my series we're finally in South America. I think there's only I want to say 10 countries in South America, so sadly we're not going to be in this continent as often as Asia or Europe. So it's always exciting to be here. We're going to be in another country later this month too, but Paraguay is a landlocked country almost in the middle of South America, and one of the most distinct things about it are its rivers. So its borders are made up of a lot of rivers. Most importantly would be the Paraguay River, which flows down, makes up this border, slices the country right in half, makes up the rest of this border. The next important one would be the Paraná River, which makes up this half of its border. It flows down through Argentina here and empties out into the Atlantic, but you can't see it in the shot. There's also the Pilcomayo River, which flows making up this border, and there's the Apa River, which makes up this border over here. So pretty much Paraguay is surrounded by water, even though it's landlocked. It's very interesting, but its borders are a big issue in its history. We'll get into it. Geographically, Paraguay has two very distinct regions, and they are characterized by each side of the Paraguay River. So this half over here is known as the Paraná. It's very lush, very fertile, perfect for farming. More hilly on this side and slopes down to over here. It gets a little flatter when it comes to over here, but there's still lots of hills. And as you can see, there are lots and lots of cities, especially down here in Paraguay. I think it's 90 or 95% of the population of Paraguay lives over here. The capital city is right here, Asunción. There's also this large city, Ciudad del Este. And let's see, Paraguay. There's lots of really important suburbs, but I won't get into it. There's also, where to go, Encarnacion down there's a pretty major city in this area. Besides the rivers here being the most prominent geographic aspect, there is one other thing that has been created sort of recently. It was in the 1970s, like late 70s, early 80s. I didn't write down the exact date, but it is right there, the Itaipu Dam. Itaipu Dam. You can see it's made this big lake over here along the Parana River. The Itaipu Dam splits hydroelectricity between Paraguay and Brazil. It is the second largest hydroelectric dam in the world, and it's a massive dam. I'll show you a picture. I think it's in this book. Yeah, it's gigantic. It's huge for a dam. So that by far is one of the most important aspects of the region. But over here on this half is what's known as the Gran Chaco, or just the Chaco. The Chaco is very flat. Flat. You can kind of see the Andes Mountains up here. So it's, the wind blowing down from the mountains and flattening everything in its path, right? It's very flat. The soil's not very good for farming. The only real farming industry you could have here is cattle, but even then there's not a lot of good grazing area for a lot of the animals because not a lot of lush plants grow in this region. It's mostly desert kind of plants, very specific kind of trees that retain moisture. Any rivers that flow through here are pretty much just seasonal rivers, so whenever there's a rainy season they'll fill up in a flood. Whenever it's a dry season they'll completely dry out. Because of this, floods, especially kind of around here, floods are an issue during any kind of rainy season coming down from the mountains, like I said, or coming from the ocean this way. And in a nutshell, that's pretty much the basic geography of Paraguay. Like I said, I'll show you some cool pictures in here. But basically, the main things to take away from Paraguay in geography are the rivers that make up its borders and the two main regions. So when we get into its early history, those two regions are very important because those two regions were home to, there were a lot of tribes that lived in this area, but two main tribes we're going to talk about today. The Guarani lived on this half of the Paraguay River. The Guarani were farmers. They created little towns and villages, their own little culture and civilization, mostly based around farming. And on this half of the Paraguay River, we had the Guaycuru. And they were the complete opposite. They were nomadic hunter-gatherers because, you can't really farm this kind of soil. They were very warlike and aggressive. These two would not mesh together. Complete opposites. So when the Spanish arrived in 1516, they first met up with the Guarani. And to be honest, let me stop there. So, drafting this video, I had to think of how to freeze its history, because my original draft, we would have been here for like 2 hours, because there's a lot of interesting things that go on, especially in this period and many of the periods coming up. So I fixed it, and then it was only like 10 minutes. So this attempt is trying to be in the middle. So with that being said, the Spanish arrived in this area first. The first major city was over here, which is now Asuncion. It was founded on August 15th, 1537 by a man named Juan de Salazar de Espinosa. And it became the main hub of the Spanish exploration and colonization of South America, especially over in Peru with the Incas. So the Guarani people come into contact with the Spanish. And there were some really terrible things that the Spanish did. They did enslave them. They to put them to work in, plantation-like slavery. But for the most part, the Guarani kind of cooperated with the Spanish. The Guarani would even sometimes team up with the Spanish to fight against the Incas to get their silver and all their riches. There's a lot of cooperation. And then, of course, over here with the Guaycuru, they fought back violently. The Spanish, of course, attacked them. Needless to say, Guarani culture and language still exists. It's widely spoken in Paraguay. Almost everyone in Paraguay speaks Guarani. Their currency is called the Guarani. A lot of people are of Guarani heritage, but you don't hear anything about Guaycuru. Just putting that out there. That tells you all you need to know about their relationship. They really did work together and figure things out, and their culture, language has survived. But they didn't have written language, so we really don't know anything about their culture before the Spanish arrived. Another group of people arrived in Paraguay around the 18th century. They were the Jesuits, which is a type of Catholic missionaries who came here to convert the natives to Catholicism. And they built different missions, I suppose. There's some over here. They're probably here on the maps, but I didn't look them up. There's a couple over here. There's a big one down here. Their main goal was to not only convert the natives to Catholicism, but to also build a little town that, they could cooperate and help them survive in the jungles of South America. And the Guarani were totally into it, honestly. If they lived on the missions, they didn't have to be enslaved. So a lot of people went and converted happily. They integrated their beliefs together, kind of mixed it up together. So it made sense for both parties involved. And we're just chilling out and having a good time on these missions, living the good life. The Spanish, after a good 150 years of this, were really threatened by it. They were afraid that the Jesuits were going to start their own colony, which they kind of were, honestly. So then the Spanish expelled the Jesuits in 1767. Their missions were left to just decay, and you can still go and visit them today. They are basically ruins, but very neat ruins. The Spanish, as time went on, had bigger fish to fry than this little region of South America that didn't really have anything to offer them. I mean, there were other areas where they could get riches, and Paraguay wasn't one of them. So the peoples of Paraguay rose up and overthrew the Spanish on May 14th, 1811. And they, needed a leader to help them with their new government. And the man that rose up was a dictator named Jose Gaspar Rodriguez de Francia. And he ruled from 1814 to 1840. He did some really terrible things as a dictator. Many people were tortured and murdered. Many, let me stress that. But he had a really unique idea for Paraguay. He decided that he was going to create a harmonious utopia. He closed off the borders from everyone, ended trade with literally everyone, and imposed, I suppose, what would be more like a communist style government, honestly. It was like a giant commune, honestly, to put it very bluntly. And he outlawed same-race marriage, so everyone had to marry someone of a different race in order to mix the gene pool and make it more homogenous. And to this day, Paraguay really has a very mixed culture, I suppose. You'll hear it later on when you'll hear some names have some very not Spanish-sounding last names. It's because a lot of cultures intermingled, not just during this period, but much later. But yeah, I'm not going to get into some of the horrible things that this man did. They were very terrible. A lot of the dictators I'm going to mention did very horrible things. I'll let you imagine those, because this is a relaxation channel. We're not going to get into details about very horrible things. But when Francia died, his nephew Carlos Antonio Lopez came into power in 1841. And so began the reign of the Lopez family. He opened the borders. He kind of erased the whole concept of the utopia. He started trading with a lot of the neighbors here. Tried to establish good relations, especially with Argentina and Brazil. Tried being the important word in that sentence. And, you know, being a dictator, he also did lots of very terrible, horrible things that we're not going to get into in this video. In my longer version, I did, and it was depressing and sad, and it just gets worse from here. So, just, you know what dictators do to people. It's terrible. He was followed by his son in 1862. His name was Francisco Solano Lopez. And he, you know, all the dictators in Paraguay's history were military-based, but Francisco Lopez was kind of the most gung-ho military mindset, I suppose. He was itching for a fight, and he found one in 1864. Brazil had invaded Uruguay down here, or Uruguay, as the rest of the world calls it, or Uruguay, I've also heard. In America, we say Uruguay. So Brazil invaded. They were, the governments were allies with Paraguay. So Paraguay decided to declare war on Brazil. Or I should say, Francisco Lopez declared war on Brazil. And he wanted his troops to pass through Argentina to get to Uruguay down here. And Argentina said no, so he declared war on Argentina. And the government in Uruguay had been overthrown by the Brazil-led coup, so they had a new government in place that was pro-Brazil. So they also declared war on Paraguay. It became known as the War of the Triple Alliance, the Triple Alliance being Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, against Paraguay. It was the bloodiest war in the history of the Americas. It was a mess, to put it bluntly. Again, I could get into the extreme details, the different battles that happened, but I'll just say that it ended in 1870 on the battlefield. Francisco Lopez was killed on the battlefield, and when the dust settled, literally 50% of the population of Paraguay had lost their lives during this war. The majority of them being adult males. What was it? I didn't write down the statistic. It was, I think, only 25% of the population after this were adult men. It wiped out a huge chunk of their population, and it affected them literally until like about the recent years, like the late 1990s. It was when the population was finally coming back up, recovering from this war, because so many people lost their lives on the battlefield in Paraguay, as did the other countries. But you know, it was already a small country to begin with. They went down from, I'm trying to remember the statistics, it was like 500,000 to 28,000. It was bad. They also lost a lot of land. Argentina and Brazil wound up claiming parts of the territory. And most importantly, I should point out, just to remember, that the Chaco, like I said up here, is just like a plain nothingness, just shrubs and dirt. So the borders were sort of iffy around here. Bolivia had parts of it, Brazil and Argentina had parts of it, and then Paraguay had parts of it. There was no agreed upon border up here, but Paraguay did not used to be this small. It was a lot bigger before that war. The political situation, to summarize, was really intense, and I mean, it was very tumultuous, to put it simply. The general population just sort of went on subsistence farming and living their daily lives as best they could, with these very repressive governments controlling their land. So it was between 1904 and 1954 that they had 31 presidents during that time who had rose to power, had been overthrown, rose to power, overthrown, on repeat. 1904 because there was a big rebellion between the two major political parties at that time. They even had a civil war in 1922. But the most important war that happened would have been the Chaco War against Bolivia, because Bolivia was ready to lay down the line and say that they owned this part of the Chaco. Paraguay said, absolutely not. That is our land. They went to war. And Paraguay actually won, and they got to take a little bit more land that they had lost during the War of the Triple Alliance, and Bolivia shrunk a little bit as Paraguay officially managed to capture this territory. Apparently, there were rumors that there could be oil in the Chaco. I don't think that ever came to fruition, but that's why both countries fought so hard against it. Bolivia took a lot of losses, but that's Bolivia's story to tell. Once we get to Bolivia in my series, we'll discuss that war more in depth. So yes, Paraguay, very politically tumultuous. Oh, you know what I didn't mention was right after the War of the Triple Alliance, when they were deciding what land should go to whom, since Paraguay had lost, there was a big debate about it between Brazil and Argentina, and it was actually U.S. President Rutherford B. Hayes that settled the argument and decided on the borders of Paraguay down here, based around the rivers. And there is a territory in Paraguay, I think it's around here. It's not on this map, there's another map of Paraguay in here, but the country's smaller, but it lists all the different regions. It's called Presidente Hayes, or President Hayes, because they consider him a great hero that saved their country. Who knew? Thanks, Rutherford B. Hayes. Where was I? Chaco War. Okay, so Civil War comes up next. They had another Civil War in 1947 that threw everything into a political disarray, but the sort of chaos happening between the political parties ended on May 4th, 1954, during a coup, and a man named Alfredo Stroessner took control. And he was another dictator. He also did very terrible, horrible things. There were some good that he did infrastructure-wise, but overall, thousands tortured and killed, the deals that dictators do. He's also responsible for creating the Itaipu Dam, and that's like his one big remaining contribution to Paraguay, among many other things, but he's definitely mostly remembered for the thousands and thousands of people that were tortured and killed under his regime. Just put it that way. Eventually, he was overthrown in a coup on February 3rd, 1989, which was led by a man named Andres Rodriguez. He allowed people to actually vote for their leader. They voted for him. He helped to set up a new constitution in 1992. In 1993, they had their first fair election, and they elected their first non-military leader in their history. His name was Juan Carlos Wasmosi. And, things were looking up for Paraguay. And then the 1998 elections happened. The original person that was running for the main party was imprisoned, for usually the reasons that politicians are imprisoned, corruption and what have you. So the next best guy in that party was elected. One of the first things he tried to do was to pardon the first candidate and get him out of prison, which people weren't happy about. It all came to a head in 1999 when his vice president was assassinated. And they wound up impeaching him, the president. 2008 was the first peaceful transition of power from one party to another, at first. He was later impeached in 2012. There's some debate about this, whether it was a coup of some sort. It wasn't a full-on military coup or bloodless coup. It was like a legal coup, I suppose. They used the Constitution against him. Apparently, a WikiLeaks cable found a conspiracy from the other party, the one that had been ruling Paraguay since its beginning, that they wanted to find literally any excuse to impeach him. And when some farmers who were being removed from their land were killed by police officers, they blamed it on the president, immediately impeached him without a trial or any preparation for it. Fernando Lugo was his name, the president at the time, and he went along with it because, that's following the Constitution. And then obviously the leader of the opposing party was placed in power, and that power, they're called the Colorado Party, by the way, that party was put back into power. So yeah, that in a nutshell is my attempt to sum up the history of Paraguay. Like I said, I could have gone into a lot more details about these dictators who had really interesting lives and did really terrible things, but I just scratched it all from the script. I did my best to sum up the rest without it being only 10 minutes long. I tried. Anyway, if I left out any important details, if you know a lot more about Paraguayan history than me, please leave it in the comments, because I did leave out a bunch. I hope in the future it'll get to come up again, because there's a lot of interesting things that happened in its history. But yeah, let's get into the book. I'll probably remember some other things as I flip through the pages. There's a guy on the cover. Paraguay. Here's one of the Jesuit missions. So as you can see, it is just a crumbled building. Most of the buildings have kind of been taken by nature, but many of them still stand, or you can see where they once stood. Let's see what we've got. So here's some of the rivers. This is the Rio Paraguay, and another picture of the Rio Paraguay. So as you can see, the waters around here are very marshy and swampy, very prone to flooding during the rainy season, which Paraguay is in the southern hemisphere, so their rainy season is during the northern hemisphere's summer. Let's see what else we have. A political map of Paraguay, where you can actually, let me get my pencil again, you can see some of the Mennonite colonies. I didn't mention the Mennonites. Another group of people that have come to sort of like build their own. Mennonites being, like, in America we call them the Amish, that have their own communities there. And you can see all the major cities down here. There's a gold llama. And we have some happy smiling people. It says, Paraguay is filled with friendly faces. Over here we have a Catholic altar, because Catholicism is still vastly the majority religion in Paraguay. More water. All swampy, marshy. Here's a good example of what the terrain in the Chaco looks like. Oh, sorry, this is Lake Ypacaraí, I believe. Let's see what else we have. A physical map of Paraguay. So let's take a look. We can see the reservoir here from the dam, the Parano Plateau, some of the mountainary areas over here, the rivers. You can see there's Via Hayes, or Via Hayes for President Hayes, and the and the Gran Chaco over here. Here's some of the hilly forested areas of Paraguay. And here's the Chaco region, very dry grassland. Here's another, let's see, this is near the Brazilian border, the Cordillera de Amambe. Some of the few big peaks in Paraguay. This is supposed to be an example of how flat the country is for the most part. Here is an interesting tree called the Polo Baracho. which stores all its water there in the trunk. Let's see. An example of some floody, marshy plants. And this is a picture of the Guaira Falls, which when the Itaipu Dam was created, flooded this area, and the falls are now completely submerged. They're lost forever. Rio Paraguay, so you can really see how wide this river is. This and the Rio Parana are very wide, very navigable rivers, so perfect for trade to go out to the Atlantic Ocean. And this is an example of the rainy season. So the rainy season is very rainy. More of the Chaco. Again, you can see why people didn't really desire to settle here or draw borders here, because it's a lot of nothing. Very, very, very sparsely populated. And it looks like these people are on top of their roof because of flooding. More pictures of the marshy water, the wetlands, wildflowers growing in the Chaco, it says. An example of the deforestation that's happening around Paraguay. Very sad. This is the lapacho tree, which has these really beautiful blossoms. Oh, there's a snake down here. I'm always very sensitive to snakes because I've known people who've had very severe snake phobias that they can't even look at a picture of a snake. So just a warning that on this next page is a snake. Here's some passion fruit, Paraguay's national flower. Up here is Paraguay's national bird, the bare-throated bellbird. And here comes the snake. It's an anaconda, the largest snake in the world, known for, they restrict their prey. Okay, so snake is gone. Now we've got a big croco, big chompies. This is a peccary, a sort of wild pig. Down here is a lungfish, which also looks really gross, but it is a fish. It's not an eel. They live in the mud during the dry season, and then they come out and swim during the rainy season. Another big lapacho tree growing in the Chaco. And here's a Palo Santo tree. Very popular for its scent, used for incense. Some birds. I think these are my favorite kind of parrot, the hyacinth macaw. They're just such a beautiful color of blue. Very sweet. And more of the beautiful rainforest in Paraguay. History's footprints. There are lots of sites of cave art and what have you from its ancient times. So here you can see where the Guarani people lived and the Guaycuru people lived, along with the other ethnic groups of the time. This was how the Guarani lived, in little houses, very much like any kind of rural village you can find in, say, like Africa or very rural parts of Asia, places like that, Central America. Very typical houses. This is an Incan drawing of some warriors fighting the Spanish. It's pretty cool. Sebastian Cabot, who, my cat's snoring, of course, right next to me. He had a big exploration of Paraguay around the rivers. This was the founder of Asuncion, Juan de Salazar de Espinosa. And this is the first governor of Paraguay, Domingo Martínez de Ayala. I wonder if this is the book. So this guy is Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, who was also sent to govern Paraguay from Spain and tried to speak up for the rights of the natives and was removed and sent back to Spain because of it. But there's a neat story here about how before that he was shipwrecked in a hurricane and crashed on Florida, and he and his surviving crew built rafts and landed in Galveston Island and walked to the other side of Mexico. It took him 8 years. What a life. Here's a picture of a Jesuit mission that's been abandoned. And a more closer picture of some of the stone that still survives. Here's an interesting map. We have the Spanish and Portuguese South America. You can see the Portuguese were over here in Brazil. The Spanish were over here in Argentina. And you can see the Jesuit mission state right here in Paraguay. Here is Paraguay's first dictator. Jose Gaspar Rodriguez de Francia. I was debating between just saying Francia or his whole name. Let's just do the whole name. Here's his nephew, Carlos Antonio Lopez, who assumed power after him. Here's a photograph from the Chaco War. This is Alfredo Stroessner, the last dictator of Paraguay. And we have Andres Rodriguez, who led the coup that overthrew Stroessner. And this was the president at the time this book came out. So obviously before all of the impeachment drama happened. This is the presidential palace that the Lopez family built for themselves to rule over Paraguay. And here is the flag, which is very, very unique. Let's find out why. It says, the Paraguayan flag has 3 equal horizontal bands of red, white, and blue. The Paraguayan flag is similar to the French flag, which was an international symbol of liberty at the time the Paraguayan flag was adopted. On the flag of Paraguay, the red stands for patriotism, courage, heroism, equality, and justice. White stands for purity, firmness, union, and peace. The blue stripe symbolizes tranquility, love, knowledge, truth, and liberty. Paraguay is the only member of the United Nations with a flag that has... Stop, Jack. Wake up. Jack, stop snoring. Stop snoring. Thank you. Paraguay is the only member of the United Nations with a flag that has different emblems on each side. The emblems are located in the center of the white band. The national coat of arms is on one side. It shows a yellow 5-pointed star inside a green wreath. Across the top are the words República del Paraguay. The opposite side of the flag bears the seal of the Treasury. It contains a yellow lion below a red cap of liberty and the words Paz y Justicia, peace and justice. Let's see. I'm not sure what this is supposed to depict. It just says how Paraguay is moving toward democracy. This young lady is voting. Luis Castiglione, vice president in 2003. And the Congress. Must have been vice president at the time. Supreme Court being sworn in. Another picture of Alfredo Stroessner. Some facts about Asuncion, the beautiful buildings here, beautiful churches, and a map of the important area of the city. Let's see what we have. Oh, the Pantheon of Heroes is like a big park, obviously about the heroes of their revolution and their war. Here is a farmer harvesting sugarcane, which has been one of the major crops of the past 100 years or so. Paraguay's currency, the guarani. Some more farms. They grow a ton of soybeans. I think they show it in here. But that's like their main export currently. Here's a big moo cow. This guy is making some clay bricks, it looks like. Leather shoes made in Paraguay. And the huge turbines of the Taipu Dam. And some ships out on the docks of the Paraguay River, heading out to the ocean. This is talking about how a lot of illegal things are brought into Paraguay from Brazil. And here's a picture of them burning some drugs, if you want a good idea of what's being brought into the country. The drug cartel, drug trade is still a major issue in the political sphere. Persons per square mile, so you can see how many people just live right here for the most part, and pretty much fewer than 3 to 1 people per square mile or square kilometer, apparently. Oh, I see. Fewer than 3 per square mile, fewer than 1 per square kilometer. I can read it now. So that's how empty that region is. Let's see. Asunción is home to twice as many people as any other city in Paraguay. That's true. Here are some people that live in the Chaco region. Looks like a very hot day. This is supposed to... this beautiful woman here. The caption's about how so many people are of mixed races in Paraguay. Here is a battle from the War of the Triple Alliance. There's a giant picture of Hitler. I don't know why there's always all these books. Here are some of the Mennonites who are attempting to farm in the Chaco. There's a mosque and some stores in Ciudad del Este. A native person living in the Chaco. She's a Maca, apparently. Gorgeous cathedral church. And here is a tupa, apparently. Some kind of ancient deity, probably creature from the olden times. It's another very beautiful church in Paraguay. Well, there's one like big one in Asunción. That might be it actually, I'm not positive, but there's a happy married couple. Beautiful stained glass window. In Cachupe? I'm not positive. We've got some Mennonites enjoying a big meal and I assume a rabbi. All kinds of people living in Paraguay. Lots of people. My cat's snoring so loud. I'm sorry if you can hear that. A wonderful family. Gorgeous looking people. This is talking about the coming of age ceremony they have. Sort of like a quinceañera, sweet 16 kind of deal. The Paraguayan harp. Very distinct musical instrument. Here's Bach. Apparently he's influenced a famous guitarist. But we have a picture of Bach instead of the guitarist, apparently. Some people enjoying the music. Oh, Augusto Roa Bastos. Oh no, he's an author, never mind. What was that? I think it's one of my other books talks about him, Agustin Barrios Moncora. This is a famous author whose work, criticized dictatorships, so he lived in exile until it was safe for him to return once Stroessner was overthrown. Another beautiful church. Gorgeous. And this is an example of the Nyanduti lace, which is made by the Guarani people. Very, very intricate and beautiful. It's their most prominent craft, like the craft that they're best known for. Getting some produce, getting some corn, I guess. They're playing baseball. I think he got a home run. He looked happy. A very rural farm, and that man drinking yerba mate, which has always been a popular drink in Paraguay since its early history. There's a picture of a kitchen. I don't know why. Some of the slums, sadly, in Rio, Paraguay. Poverty also being a big issue. Another example of the poor conditions they live in. And here's a picture of yerba mate, which, like, when you break it down, is like an iced tea, but not like iced tea like we would know it in the United States. very distinct kind of drink. Here's some cassava roots. The national dish is the sopa paraguaya, which means Paraguayan soup, but it's not a soup at all. It's like a pudding. And there's some barbecue. Doing their homework. Independence Day celebration. And of course, soccer is a big part of daily life in Paraguay, pretty much the entirety of South America. One of the most famous Paraguayan football players, Jose Luis Chilavert, not positive, but he was the goaltender for his team. That's the end of our book tonight. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational. I know I really tried. I put a lot of work into this video because I've been researching Paraguay for like a week now, a lot longer than I do most other countries. I'll usually give it about 3 or 4 days, but I kept finding interesting facts about its history and its culture and learning more and more about it. So hopefully we can revisit this region very soon. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you have a very